Good morning and welcome to today's webinar entitled Clinical Research Careers in North Carolina. I'm Dan McClellan, e-learning coordinator for the BioNetwork BioEd Center, and our BioForum is scheduled to run from 10:30 a.m. until approximately 11:30 Eastern Time. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Vernon Shoaf.
Thank you, Dan. We are very fortunate to have two fantastic panelists on the call today. Angie Kimel. She is a research associate from Wake Forest University Health Sciences, and Laurin Mancour from Durham Technical Community College, where she is a program director for the Clinical Trials Research Associate Program. Following Laurin Mancour's presentation, I will be talking about an exciting new program we are offering called Foundations in Clinical Research. It is a 2-week, fully online career exploration tool designed to provide you with more information about opportunities in the clinical research industry. Angie, I will turn it over to you, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Vernon. I'm going to take a few minutes now to discuss a brief overview of clinical research and the clinical research careers that we have in North Carolina. For our agenda today, we're going to be looking at some very brief topics that include what is a clinical trial and how is it regulated, who are the key players, what is the drug development process, what type of careers exist, the current educational opportunities in North Carolina, and what the clinical research arena looks like in North Carolina and how BioNetwork fits into all of this. So what is a clinical trial? Clinical trials basically are research studies that test how well new medical treatments work in people. Most people think of them as drug studies, and most of them are testing new drugs, but some do test other interventions, such as herbal remedies and lifestyle modifications. Regardless of what they're studying, however, clinical trials answer scientific questions and attempt to find improved ways to prevent, screen for, diagnose, or treat a disease. The backbone of every trial is the clinical trial protocol. This document is an action plan for conducting the entire trial. It describes many things, including why the trial is important, what research questions will be answered, how the trial will be conducted, and how subjects will be kept safe. Clinical trials are highly regulated on both federal, state, and even the international levels. Some of the international guidance that we have includes ICH GCP, which is also known as Good Clinical Practice, the Belmont Report, the Declaration of Helsinki, and the Nuremberg Code. ICH GCP is an international standard covering all aspects of a clinical trial, whereas the others are documents specifically related to ethics and the fair treatment of research subjects. On a national level in the U.S., the Code of Federal Regulations contains several parts that specifically relate to clinical research. Title 21 is reserved for the FDA and includes regulations on all research on substances that are intended for eventual marketing. And Title 45 is reserved for the Department of Health and Human Services, Part 46 specifically dealing with clinical research that's federally funded. Each of these are enforceable by law, and failure to comply can result in significant penalties. And for the remainder of this talk, we'll be focusing on definition and terms used in Title 21 of the CFR. So who are the key players in clinical research? 3 of these key players are specifically defined and described in Title 21 of the regulations. They are the sponsor, or a contract research organization, which we'll talk about in a minute, investigators, and the IRB, or Institutional Review Board. Each of these have specific definitions and duties outlined in Title 21, and we'll go over them now. The first role we're going to look at is the sponsor. A sponsor is an individual or an organization who initiates and takes responsibility for a clinical trial but does not actually conduct the investigation. We typically think of the pharmaceutical companies as sponsors, but other companies and individuals can also be a sponsor. Some of their specific responsibilities include selecting qualified investigators, providing the protocol, ensuring compliance with all regulations, and reporting any safety changes to investigators. We mentioned earlier there was a contract research organization, and this is also defined by the regulations. They're commonly referred to as CROs, and they are companies or individuals who assume any or all of the obligations of a sponsor. The transfer of duties is documented in writing, and at that point, the CRO is subject to the same regulatory action as a sponsor for failure to comply with regulations. So therefore, any mention of the word sponsor in the regulations also applies to a CRO to the extent that the CRO has assumed those obligations. The next role I want to discuss is the investigator. The clinical investigator is an individual who conducts an investigation, or, as is more often the case, is the responsible leader of a team of individuals who conducts the trial. The investigator takes on full responsibility for the conduct of the study and the integrity of the research data, and is the person that is subject to any penalties for noncompliance. The investigator can delegate duties to specific team members. However, he or she retains the responsibility for proper conduct. The Institutional Review Board, or IRB, is our third key player that is mentioned in the regulations. And this is a board, committee, or other group of formally designated to review and to approve the initiation of and to conduct periodic review of biomedical research that involves human subjects. They are chiefly responsible for assuring the protection of the rights and welfare of the human subjects by ensuring that the risks assumed by taking part in the study do not outweigh the potential benefits. Specific membership requirements for IRBs are outlined in the regulations, and as well as duties such as record keeping, and they're actually listed in Title 45. So we're going to jump ahead to the drug development process now. And I want to start with a little trivia, just some facts to consider. First, it takes approximately 12 to 15 years to bring a compound from the laboratory actually to market. And it costs close to $800, even to $900 million to develop and market these drugs. And only about 1 in 50,000 chemical compounds actually completes the drug development cycle and eventually makes it to market. So you can see this is a very time-consuming process. And here we have a clinical development timeline. It's a very simplified schematic of a typical clinical development process. And you can see that includes many phases of development. These phases include preclinical testing, phase 1, 2, and 3, which are often divided into 3A and 3B, and phase 4, which is also called post-marketing research. As you can see at the top of the image, regulatory permission to test is sought between the preclinical and phase 1 portions, and permission to market or to sell the drug is not requested until after phase 3, when enough data have been gathered about the drug. And now we'll look at these phases in a bit more detail. Preclinical testing is also sometimes referred to as phase 0, consists of laboratory testing to determine a compound's safety and pharmacological properties. These tests provide rationale required to support evaluating the product in humans for a specific indication. They answer such questions as what happens to the drug in the body? How long is the drug effective? What happens to the body when given the drug? Is the drug safe and tolerable? And how should the drug be taken? The next step is phase 1, and this is done after preclinical testing is complete. This is the first use of a new drug in humans. These studies typically dose healthy volunteers, but in some cases, they can dose subjects who have end-stage disease who lack other treatment options. The purpose of these studies is to gather information on tolerance, metabolism, and drug interactions. At this point, they're not investigating efficacy, which is how well a drug works. It usually consists of 20 to 80 subjects, so they're very small, and they last anywhere from 6 months to a year. Phase 2 trials are generally concerned with gathering data on effectiveness and short-term safety, exploring the use for a targeted indication, and establishing dose-response relationship and estimating a dose for future studies. They normally involve a very small population, but this time the population is of disease subjects, and this may include testing for other indications. Usually there are about 100 to 300 people in these studies. And Phase 2 is actually the most common point of failure for a new drug, as this is where the drug is discovered not to work as planned or to have toxic effects. So once passing Phase 2, the new drug moves into Phase 3, where studies are conducted to further confirm safety and assess the effectiveness in a larger population. At this point, the new drug is typically compared to currently available therapies, and these trials tend to last about 3 years. And at this point, we're starting to get into the large population of disease subjects, and this is the typical clinical trial that most people think of. And finally, Phase 4, which is also called post-marketing surveillance, occurs after permission to market has been sought and after Phase 3A and Phase 3B studies have been completed. At this point, the trial is continuing to evaluate safety, but with a focus on long-term events. Populations in these studies are very large and can include several thousand subjects, and they tend to last several months to several years. So now that we have a basic understanding of the drug development process, we're going to talk about different careers in clinical research. The first career I want to mention is the clinical research coordinator. These individuals are on the front lines, so to speak, working directly with investigators and research subjects. They tend to be in academic institutions or in private practice where the vast majority of study participants can be located. The study coordinator is typically in charge of managing the research study and is directly involved with recruiting and enrolling research participants, arranging follow-up visits, maintaining study drugs and supplies, and completing the case report or data collection forms and the regulatory documents. Typical minimum requirements for a clinical research coordinator are a bachelor's degree in life science or a related field of certification such as an RN, a minimum of 2 years experience in a clinical environment is desired. And of course, these requirements vary by investigative sites and different companies. Typical salary ranges between $35,000 and $50,000, and a possible career path outlined on the slide is the research coordinator, who then moves up to a site manager who may manage several research teams and eventually into project management. However, another career path that many research coordinators take includes a jump, if you will, from the investigative site to a CRO of or a sponsor as a clinical research associate. And a clinical research associate is a person employed by a sponsor or a CRO and is responsible for monitoring the clinical trials to ensure protocol compliance. And they do this by performing on-site visits and reviewing trial data and communicating with the investigators. Minimum requirements for this type of job, and again, these vary by company, is a bachelor's degree in the life sciences or a related field of certification, 2 years experience in the clinical environment that included experience in clinical trials. Average salary is anywhere from $45,000 to $120,000, and this depends on your experience and your seniority. There are many possible career paths, one of which we've outlined here is to move up the ranks into a senior CRA and eventually through to project management. Now, these are only 2 careers that we've highlighted in detail, but there are many, many other career options. These include research assistants, biostatisticians, medical writers, regulatory affairs professionals, quality assurance professionals, contract and budget negotiators, and information system analysts. Some of these are entry-level, and some are areas that require extensive experience, but all of them work to support clinical research operations at some level. So we've talked about careers. Now the question is, how do you get there? We want to focus now on current opportunities here in North Carolina. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is a new online course that will be offered through the North Carolina BioNetwork in just a few short weeks. This course involves 6 different modules, each focusing on a different aspect of clinical research, including drug development, human subjects protection, regulations and guidance, IRBs, comparing the 2 CFRs, Title 45 and Title 21, because they are different, and clinical research study management. Courses are very interactive and scenario-based, and they provide an excellent entry-level learning experience for those wanting to know more about the field of clinical research. For those wanting a more formal path of education, several associate degree and certificate programs are available within the state. These include a certificate and associate degree programs at Durham Tech, which Laurin will go to in a bit more detail later, and a certificate course at Cape Fear Community College in Wilmington, North Carolina. There are also bachelor and master's programs available. Campbell University and the University of North Carolina at Wilmington both offer a bachelor's and a master's of science in clinical research. And Wake Forest University offers a Master of Science in Clinical Population and Translational Research. And if you're interested in more information about clinical research, there are some books and magazines that you may want to look into. 3 books that I personally recommend are The Fundamentals of Clinical Trials, Ethics and Regulation of Clinical Research, and then Clinical Research by Miller and Crabtree. And there are various journals and magazines which you can look up on the internet and subscribe to as well. And then finally, we have some professional organizations which are also great areas to get more information. The first is SOCRA, which is the Society of Clinical Research Associates. They have about 13,000 members, and they are focused in more of the study coordinator and project management levels. You have ACRP, the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, which has about 20,000 members, and they are more focused on the clinical research associate and the pharmaceutical side of the industry. And then SRA International, which is the Society of Research Administrators, and they handle more of the budgets, contracts, and financial obligations, and they have about 4,000 members. And that is my talk.
Thank you very much, Angie. This is Vernon Shoaf again. We appreciate the information that you have shared with us. There's a lot going on in the industry and a lot of opportunities around the state. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Laurin Mancour, who will talk about the program at Durham Technical Community College. Laurin?
Thank you, Vernon. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to talk to you a little bit and just give you a brief overview of the Clinical Trials Research Associate Program, which we abbreviate to be CTRA, here at Durham Technical Community College. The mission of our program, to elaborate a little bit further on what Angie has shared about the professional roles in clinical research, we want to prepare individuals to assist the principal investigators and clinical researchers in the initiation, administration, study coordination, and also project management of clinical research studies to develop new drugs, clinical products, medical devices, biologics, and other therapeutic treatment regimens. Our program is arguably the first curriculum program in clinical research in the country, and I say arguably because there's another college on the West Coast that's debating those bragging rights with us. But we began our program back in 1998, and we've grown from starting with about 20 students to now we accept a new group of students each term. We have approximately 60 students to 80 students that we can accept in the fall semester into our evening and online program. We accept up to 30 students in the spring term, which begins in January, into our day program. And to us, day starts at approximately 3 p.m. 25 students are accepted into our summer data management program, which is available exclusively online. Now, under the CTRA program umbrella, we do offer an Associate in Applied Science degree, a Level 1 certificate for individuals who either already have a degree or background in a biological science or at least 1 year of employment already working in industry. We also have a certificate level 2 for the individuals who either come with that strong core background in biological science and have at least 2 years of employment in industry, or for individuals who've completed our level 1 program. In addition, as I mentioned, we have a data management certificate, and the data management certificate is available entirely online. It's for individuals that have either been working already for 1 year in data management, have a very strong background in computer science or electronics engineering, or who've completed our level 1 certificate. Now I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about the Associate in Applied Science degree. This degree is a 7-semester program, and we do, within the scope of that degree, expect graduates to complete at least a year of core English writing courses, a year of pharmacology, a year of anatomy and physiology, but we also start with foundation level clinical trials classes and migrate through more challenging topics, including most of the ones that Angie touched on earlier, the federal regulations. We teach a course where we discuss Title 21, Title 45 regulations. We talk about the international ethical codes of conduct in clinical research. We also explore some very practical hands-on applications of what it's like to be a study coordinator or principal investigator in our research site management class, where we have you actually performing some of the on-the-job duties ranging from assembling clinical labs to conducting clinical research visits to working with data clarifications and industry monitors that monitor the ongoing progress of the clinical trial. Conversely, we have a class where we teach you how to be a clinical study monitor or project manager that works for a sponsor or potentially pharmaceutical company or device company that may manufacture the investigational product being tested in research. We also have a protocol writing course, some professional practice courses, and an introduction to data management within the scope of that degree. It's very heavy science coursework, as I'd mentioned. We do request that students choose between either the microbiology or pathophysiology path on their plan of study to, again, continue investing in those science classes that will enable you to understand the mechanism of action of some of these investigational products and how they should work in a patient population. We also have found that, especially with some of the challenges of the current economy, we get asked a lot of questions. How do I get a job when I don't have experience? But how do I get experience if I can't get a job in clinical research? We've really circumvented those kinds of challenges with our Fieldwork program that's a part of our Associate in Applied Science degree, which enables you to work with industry thought leaders here in the Research Triangle Park community to get hands-on experience. And that fieldwork is performed in the 5th and 7th semesters. Many students ask, why should I go ahead and get another degree if I already have a degree? Well, a lot of the professional associations, including the CRA and ACRP professional associations mentioned on Angie's slides, accept completion of a clinical trials degree as equivalent to 1 out of the 2 years of experience needed to sit for industry certification exams. And although you do not need an explicit clinical research license, certification demonstrates to the professional public that you meet a certain set of gold standard competencies for the profession. Our certificate programs that I'd mentioned, are 4 semesters. The first 4 CTR courses on the associate's degree plan of study are included in the level 1 certificate. And again, I touched briefly previously on the requirements for admission to that level 1 certificate. Level 2 is also 4 semesters, and that is the second 4 clinical trials research associate courses from the associate's plan of study. We've really streamlined for our level 1 and level 2 certificates the associate's degree program and sort of split it down the middle to remove a lot of those core science requirements, since most of the individuals who enter our certificates either have acquired that through their professional activities or a prior degree. Our data management certificate is also very unique. It is the first data management curriculum program in the country. Our data management certificate is 4 semesters. And again, it does require that you either have that bachelor's degree, the experience in data management, or complete one of our other certificates prior to entry. I'd like to also talk a little bit about the course sequence. We do admit students, as I've mentioned, every semester, a new cohort of students. The students that are getting ready to start in January during our spring term are referred to as our day cohort, and the Clinical Trials Research Associate courses on their plan of study will be taken between 3 and 5 p.m. The other courses on the plan of study can be taken whenever they're available at the college. But that day cohort of students, we do have them late in the afternoon because, of course, our ultimate goal is employment in the industry. And the day courses are a hybrid format, so it only requires that you attend class 1 day a week, as the rest of your work will be completed online. The fall semester, our largest group of students, has the option of taking courses either during the evening in the hybrid format that meets 1 day a week, or exclusively online. All of the CTR courses in the fall are available only to those students during the evening and online, and the spring term students are only available in that hybrid 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. format. Our data management program is exclusively online, and that begins in the summer. The schedules are a little bit different from some of the other community colleges courses. As I'd mentioned, the hybrid format is very convenient for working professionals, as a 3-credit-hour course will not require you to come to campus 2 days a week. The courses do need to be taken sequentially, so all of the classes in the plan of study, I'd mentioned the certificates, for example, are 4 terms. They can't be consolidated into 1 semester. Because they are concept cumulative and one course serves as the prerequisite for another, the CTR courses do need to be taken in order and as they are listed on the plan of study. Again, we do have options for day, evening, and online courses, and our capstone course, CTR 281, enables you to directly interface with industry. Part of your course is for you to complete a resume or CV, and we do ask that you work together with industry partners that we pair you with for very structured mentoring opportunities and practicing behavioral interview skills. As I mentioned, we do have the Fieldwork, which is an unpaid internship. It is presently only available during daytime hours, but we're exploring options to complete virtual internships online. This is only required for the degree, but again, due to the number of students that have experienced challenges finding the right professional fit in the community, once our certificate students complete their coursework on the certificate, we have created opportunities for them to register for Fieldwork courses. And again, the goal of Fieldwork is not only to facilitate that direct connection with industry, but allow you the opportunity to acquire some very marketable professional skills that are desired by local industry stakeholders. The types of Fieldwork sites that we currently use include investigative sites that range from academic medical centers to multi-specialty sites that advertise and recruit directly for research participants. We also work with clinical research organizations ranging from companies like PPD or Quintiles to mid-level CROs that have more of a specialty or niche functionality. We work with industry sponsors, and sponsors are the companies that make the investigational products like the GlaxoSmithKlines and other companies in the area that are rather large. And we work with data management organizations like Clinipace Worldwide and other data service providers in this area. In order to be admitted to the college CTRA program, the associate's degree students, since they're taking a lot of core college-level transferable courses, are required to take placement tests. But all students are required to apply to the college and specifically note the CTRA program as the program of interest. For all students, we do require transcripts so that we can determine whether or not, if you've taken college-level coursework elsewhere, you may have placed out or received transfer credit. And at times there is a waiting list, so admission to each of the cohorts that I've mentioned is competitive, and it's important to go ahead and apply to the college early and start working through those admissions requirements with our admissions counselor so that you can be advised by faculty members and register in the appropriate time frame. We do on our website have a frequently asked questions sheet detailing employment opportunities. Also, on the durhamtech.edu website, we have a link to outside employment for students and graduates in the field of clinical research that we maintain over time. I believe Angie touched on the salaries for clinical research professionals that can range anywhere from the $40,000 range to six figures, depending on the skills and certification of our graduates. And we do have an annual career fair held in October each year here on campus, again, to facilitate that direct connection and networking with industry representatives for the purposes of employment. I'm the Program Director of the Clinical Trials Research Associate Program, and I'm open to answering your questions about our curriculum or opportunities at any time if you wish to contact me. Thank you again.
Laurin, thank you very much for that presentation and for the information you shared about the program at Durham Tech. That's an exciting opportunity, several different paths to go down, so we thank you for that. Prior to the Q&A session, which will be held next, I would like to introduce something that we've spoken about a couple times already, and that is the Foundations in Clinical Research research tool that we've provided for you. It's a 2-week program to give you an idea or an opportunity to explore in greater detail some of the things you've learned today. The registration period is open now, but if you register before November 15th, you'll receive $10 off. Like we said, it's a 2-week program broken into several parts, and I'll give you some opportunity to see some screenshots at this time. You've already heard about the drug development overview process. This online course is highly interactive, designed to give you the opportunity to explore the process. What we do in the course is we give you the opportunity to understand or have a greater understanding of what happens from the inception of a product in the lab to its finished product on the marketplace. And Angie had spoken about that earlier. You get to interact with a timeline and see how long that takes and how much money it actually costs to accomplish this. Our second part is the human subject protection and informed consent, which will interact with patient profiles to see if they fit into a study. In this particular scenario, the study is focused on folks with hypertension, and you'll have the opportunity to decide whether they should be included or excluded from the research study. This is a screenshot. We try to make it as realistic as possible given real-life scenarios you would see in the industry and as part of your coursework. You'll get immediate feedback if you get something incorrect, and the whole process is to guide you to learn more about the process. See another example here of another gentleman being considered for a study, and if you select the inclusion and exclusion criteria correctly, you get feedback either way, but in this case, Mr. Smith does meet the criteria for the study. And in the third module of our first part here is the regulations and guidance. Again, just a few more screenshots for you. Well, you'll be acting as an auditor for a drug company to make sure the regulations are being followed correctly. So you'll be exposed to things such as the development process, the human subject protection side, and then the regulation side. That's the first week. The second week we transition and talk about the institutional review boards. We compare different regulations. One is called Title 45, the other one is called Title 21. And then the last module is Clinical Research Study Management. Again, some feedback for you. That's the essence of the course. Throughout the course, Angie Kimel, our presenter today, will be facilitating that. We will also have opportunities for you to interact online in a webinar-based forum similar to today. At this point, I would like to transition to our Q&A time, and we are fortunate to have Jennifer Pullum on the call with us today. She is the Director of Clinical Research the Director of Clinical Management at PPD, and she also offers a course in the overview of clinical research at Cape Fear Community College. Jen, I will pull up a slide for you now that highlights the program at Cape Fear.
Okay.
And if you would just, let me back up a few slides here, give you the opportunity to speak about that program.
All right. Good morning, everyone. As Vernon said, I am Jen Pullum, the Director of Clinical Management at PPD. I'm actually located in the World Headquarters in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've been here about 12 years. I'm a registered nurse and actually started my career at PPD in 1999 as a CRA. So I've really tried to stay involved in a whole lot of different things. My first degree actually is in education, so to be able to offer a course through the Continuing Ed Department at Cape Fear was a real thrill for me. In 2004, we're in discussions with Cape Fear, especially because the PPD World Headquarters was moving just down the street from Cape Fear. We've always been very active in the community, and so we had an initiative between PPD and Cape Fear Community College to bring to light a little bit more information about the field of clinical research, really to the general population in Wilmington, because there was a real misconception, I should say, that somehow all the offices at PPD somehow made the medications, and we were manufacturers or these kinds of things. And so we really wanted to put some real information out there, exactly what is a CRO, what is clinical drug development, and how does all of that work. So with that in mind, we got our Global Learning and Performance department here at PPD, they run all of our training and put all of our training together. They actually compiled all of the materials to do a basic overview of clinical research, starting from the very beginning. So, Vernon, you can go to the next slide. What we've done in this course is it's a team-taught concept. So I have actually a partner, Joseph Christian, who has been teaching with me since 2007. We started the course in the fall of 2004. We teach one session per semester. The course length is 30 hours, so it's 2 sessions per week for 6 weeks, so it's about 5 hours a week for about 6 weeks. And we found that we've got a mixture, usually about 2/3 to 1/3, 2/3 from PPD and about 1/3 from the community. And so it's interesting because PPD hires a very level, a variety of different level individuals that are coming in as entry level. It could be in contracts, it could be in finance, it could be in all kinds of different things. And then we've got community participants. I had one entire department from New Hanover Regional Medical Center come in last fall. The entire department signed up for the class, and so it's a variety of different community individuals. We'll have a lot of older individuals that'll take the course because they want to find out a little bit more about how they got their medications, and so it's been a really great mix of individuals. All right, next slide. So what we do in here is over the course of 6 weeks, and it's amazing how fast this course goes by. It's amazing. We like for the students to bring in current events, and we like to tell them that when you finish this course, you'll be surprised at how much you pay attention to the world around you, where you never really paid attention before. And we will see over the course of 6 weeks that people will bring all kinds of current events in, and they will talk about things that they've seen on the television or articles that they've read in the newspaper or news articles that they've seen come out through different news programs. And so we will also, assign some assignments to some participants if they have a certain question and that they want to know about certain medications. We'll say, you know what? Everybody needs to bring in a package insert from a medication that you have in your house, and let's talk about them. And what does that package insert really mean, and how did you get it, and why is it written the way that it is? So we'll have the participant assignments as well. Inside this 30-hour course, we put some hands-on activities that we built in here. So about every week, there is something for them to put their physical hands on. We do an informed consent review with the informed consent process, and that they need to be checking an informed consent very carefully. We do a regulatory document review, and we complete a 1572 the way that it should be completed. We take a small section of source documentation and a paper CRF, if you will, and we have them look at this template and find all the discrepancies or ask some questions on what we think could be gray areas that we need to do more follow-up on. And then we've got an investigational product accountability exercise as well, where we actually go through the exercise of a source document of where we have distributed pill form medication. We actually have the bottles of fake medication that they actually count the tablets, glove up and count the tablets. And then we've got an end of course assessment. It's a comprehensive exam of everything that we have been over through the entire course. I think it might be around a 10 or 11 page assessment, and so we built that in there as well. I can't remember if I have another slide after that. Do I have another slide?
That's it. Yeah.
Anyway, and so by the time it's all said and done, we've gone through 6 weeks of review. We've covered a really nice general book, if you will, of a basic overview, and I think it gives a good flavor, especially to those individuals who are new to industry. I've even had people that work at PVD say, I'm looking at the way I do my job a little bit differently now, and I think that goes a long way. So anyway, that's really all that we've got going on at Cape Fear, and I will say this: I've actually hired some people out of my class because I've had a lot of nurses take the course. And so I've hired some as CRAs and some in the safety department. So, and some in my administrative group. So it's been a good thing, I think, for the community and those individuals, even here at PPD, that have taken the course. Any questions? We'll go over at the Q&A session.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for sharing that information about this opportunity at Cape Fear Community College. And with all the information you've heard today, especially from I guess Durham Tech and Cape Fear, it's a good example of industry and local communities working together, and certainly that includes Wake Forest and Winston-Salem, which is really an anchor in that community. Now we'd like to transition and talk about some of the questions that have come through our chat box, and we'll start off by saying, number one, how many clinical trials companies exist in North Carolina, and how many do they employ? Feel free to any of our panelists to join in and try to fill in that.
Hi, this is Laurin Mancour. We have it's challenging to come up with a very specific number for how many clinical trials companies exist in North Carolina, to be candid, simply because there's such a range of diversity in clinical trials organizations. It would be easier to talk about the number of clinical trials companies that operate in each of the traditional spaces, such as the principal investigators, the academic medical centers, the sponsors, and the clinical research organizations. But when you consider the range of diversity in clinical trials organizations, and the fact that the Research Triangle Park really community is centralized to North Carolina, it is really challenging to wrap your head around that number, because so many innovative products and entrepreneurs are also working in the clinical trial space, especially on the technology side. So I regret to admit I don't have a specific number because it keeps changing. I would say we have at least 5 major academic medical center organizations. We do have numerous clinical trial sponsors, but again, with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center and some of the support that companies get coming to North Carolina with innovative products, there are more contract research organizations and sponsors, I think, currently than there have been in years past. So that's trying to hit that number like a nail on the head is like trying to hit a moving target right now, because that number is actively growing. So I apologize for the qualified answer, but I wanted to explain the pregnant pause. I don't know that I have a specific metric on that. Jennifer, Angie, have either of you got more current information as far as numbers?
I do not.
Actually, no, I agree with you completely. It's very hard to pin that down because there's so many small companies. And we tend to think of the Glaxos and SmithKline and all those, but there are so many smaller companies. Just down the road from me is Targacept. They specialize in hypertension drugs. There's no way to know.
Yeah. I mean, BioCryst is there. There's all kinds of companies in the Research Triangle. I will tell you one interesting thing is I believe just in Wilmington, whereas PPD used to be the only CRO and then they branched off, there were 2. There are now 9. Just in Wilmington of CROs.
This is Vernon. In terms of the concentration of clinical research organizations in the nation, it's my understanding that North Carolina either is #1 or at the top in that realm. Is that accurate?
That is true. The last date I had, we were #2.
Okay.
North Carolina was. Yeah, globally.
That's correct. And if you go to the ncbiotech.org website and click on the links for employment and job searches, you can tell that due to the number of diverse professional roles and opportunities and organizations represented on that website, why it's so hard to really put your finger on a specific number, because again, we are one of the largest research centers in the country. I'd venture to say North America.
I agree.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's transition and look at question number 2 in regards to travel. Does working in clinical research require a lot of travel, since patients participating in trials can be located anywhere?
This is Angie, and this is the dreaded answer that we all hate, and that is, it depends. Clinical research, it is true that participants can be anywhere. I manage an international trial right now with 77 different clinical centers around the United States and Canada, but I actually do not travel very often. I am more into project management, and we have others who go out and do the monitoring. So it depends on what you're in. Study coordinators typically do not travel unless it's regionally, with the exception of attending investigator meetings. Usually that depends on the clinic load, how many trials that one clinic may be doing. If they're very heavily involved in clinical research, that could be several meetings a year. If they have one study, it's very few meetings a year. Probably the biggest travelers are the clinical research associates, the monitors. They're the ones who go on site. But that has even changed throughout the years. It used to be expensive travel, and most sponsors and CROs now are going more towards regional travel. So unfortunately, it depends, but that's something that if you are interviewing for a job, that's definitely something you could ask the person you're interviewing with.
And this is Jen. We've seen in the industry the current level of travel, and this is based on really a lot of documentation out there. Travel can be anywhere from 60 to 100%. On average, it's around 75% for a CRA, and we are trying to get better as an industry on regionalized travel. And travel's much more difficult post 9/11 than when I came into the 90s. So. Much more difficult, and so we're getting a little bit better with the regional piece as an industry, I believe, just because we're trying to decrease the wear and tear. But travel is still going to be required, even though the FDA has come out with, more documentation in August to a risk-based monitoring approach, which means we can look at the way that we monitor. So that might be a discussion. It should be a discussion for another day on how we monitor data, but I think that will have an impact on how we travel in the future. But for right now, CRAs do bear the brunt of the travel in the industry, and I don't see that changing significantly for a little while.
I might add to this, is Laurin, that the percentage of travel that Jennifer mentioned, our call participants today need to be mindful when asking questions of employers about travel that 75% doesn't necessarily mean that 3/4 of your week will be on the road. You can have several weeks in the office, and then so that travel will be sporadic and vary at different times in the life cycle of a given product, where you may be, home 3 days the first month with a brand new trial that just kicked off. You'll be home more in the middle of the trial, and then you'll be hitting the road more extensively as you're trying to wrap up and clean data at the end. So if you're concerned about travel, ask very specific questions of your employer to make sure that you understand that 50% doesn't necessarily mean half of the week or half of the month. It could mean you're traveling constantly for 3 months and then off for 3 months, and have very specific work-life balance questions oriented to that nature.
That's good feedback. That is true, yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's transition and look at question number 3. Does the preclinical testing include the testing of animal trials, or is that more an R&D function?
Since I came from the non-clinical world or the preclinical world, I'm happy to address that. Preclinical testing, again, with the advent of new technologies, has really changed. On the device side, preclinical testing can involve a lot of engineering, actually. So on the drug side or biologic sides, often it does include animal studies, but again, we've improved our technology and we have new resources and tools like molecular modeling, confocal microscopy. There's a lot that you can do with tissues in a laboratory that doesn't necessarily involve direct animal testing. This is more for developing investigational products in the life cycle of a new therapeutic. That is more on the research and development side. However, as Angie touched on the phases of clinical study, often it's not as if there's a direct handoff. We got it to a certain point in development on the non-clinical or preclinical side, and now we're testing it in humans. Often there's ongoing testing on the non-clinical side as we're doing clinical research, because we may find things and learn new things about the drug once we've exposed, to use a drug as an example, once we've exposed that intervention in a human subject population that we want to go back and reassess in the laboratory. So it's not an immediate handoff from the preclinical to the clinical research side as many individuals think. Often it's ongoing.
I think the next question is related to this as well, certainly about ethical considerations for phase 1 testing. And are there considerations for testing in human individuals?
There are certainly ethical considerations to phase 1 testing. I've spent the last 7 years on the IRB here at Wake Forest, and we don't see many of these come through, but occasionally we do. All research studies involving humans must go through an IRB and get approval, including phase 1. And I think the question at the root of this question is, why would you put a new drug in someone who's otherwise healthy? And you have to have significant evidence that the risk has been minimized as much as possible. When these phase 1 study protocols are coming through, they have to have a lot of phase 0 evidence, a lot of the laboratory testing, several animal studies, and other things like that before it will be allowed to go through. And the other thing that IRBs typically do is they will require extra safety monitoring. And very often it's a per subject basis. So we will allow one subject to be tested, and if that subject does okay, then the second person can go through, and then the third. This isn't something where we would dose a lot of people at one time. So they are very tightly monitored because we obviously do not want healthy individuals putting too much at risk for a new drug, because if it's the first time in humans, that alone is a lot of risk. But they are very carefully monitored, and the ethical considerations are carefully weighed out before the trials are allowed to continue.
All right, thank you. I think I'll answer number 5, 9, and 10 at the same time, because they're more logistics about the course, and we'll get back to specifics related to clinical research. Number 5 is, do I have to be a community college student to sign up for the course? And the answer is absolutely not. This is a course for you to explore opportunities prior to making a career decision or signing up for a course or a career program or an academic program. And so that relates to, I guess, the one about the time frame between December 5th and 19th. There is not a certain time during the day where students are required to log in or sign in each day. This course is at your own pace, and we are at your service to answer additional questions you may have over those 2 weeks. The first week is really geared towards part 1 of the course. There's 3 modules you can work through, and then part 2 has additionally 3 modules to work through. And then the last question on the screen before we get back to more specifics of clinical research is probably more directed towards Durham Tech, and are there opportunities for students in the western part of the state for clinical research degrees?
You want me to jump into that one?
Yeah, sure, Laurin. I'll let you into that one.
Okay. I definitely think that there are opportunities in the western part of the state for clinical research degrees. In fact, the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, or ACRP organization, will be opening up a new chapter in Asheville shortly. I do think that they're different from other parts of the state. For example, in the Research Triangle Park area, you have a lot of diversity in all of the types of industry stakeholders that we discussed. In the western part of the state, there's a lot of clinical research going on in those multi-specialty sites and in the academic research center or environment. There are not as many large sponsors or CROs in that area. But again, networking is really important for employment in this field. And I think increasing professional development activities in the western side of the state, aligning yourself with those types of organizations will help you become more aware of the types of employers and opportunities in your area.
And Laurin, do you have a certain portion of your program available online?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A large portion, if you started in the fall, you could take the evening and online courses. And if you had any challenges getting specific sections of other classes that were a part of the degree or certificate, those core courses, those Englishes, sociology, ethics, are available at community colleges across North Carolina and are transferable.
And just to refresh our memory, I know you mentioned on a few of your slides when your advising period begins for accepting new students in your program.
In general, you want to have already applied and be ready for advising 2 months prior to the start of each next term. For example, our next term starts in January, and we are already in the middle of advising new applicants for that semester. So the timeline would be very ambitious if you wanted to start this spring, but if you wanted to start in the summer or fall, it would be very appropriate for you to go ahead and start applying and transferring transcripts.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next question actually will go back up to question 6, and it relates to the economy and how it has affected the number of graduates or getting jobs are the same from Durham Tech's program.
I would actually say that the number of graduates getting jobs is increasing at this point. We've tried some new things, and we do have an advisory committee of industry stakeholders that advise us on what our graduates need to do to remain employable. And incorporating some of the feedback, we've increased the number of professional development events that we have here on campus. We were just approached by the Drug Information Association, which is a very large organization with over 18,000 members, and a global organization. They've invited us to have one of the first ever student chapters here at Durham Technical Community College. The data management program, our courses are actually taught by the Vice President of Data Track, which is a very large industry service provider of data management courses, data management software, and the vice president of that company teaches our courses, so all of our students have marketable experience with the research sources and tools of the trade in industry. In addition, I'd already mentioned that capstone course where we pair students with industry mentors in the community to practice interview skills and tell them what they need to do in a behavioral interview environment to get the job. So I think the number of things that we've done, including fieldwork, to make direct connections between our students and industry stakeholders has assisted them with getting jobs. And the career fair every year, the professional development opportunities and meetings here on campus, that also provides our graduates the opportunity to continue to network with students in the program and facilitate those kinds of connections. So I would venture to say, despite the challenges of the economy, it is growing.
Okay. Thank you. Well, let's look at question number 7. Is there any difference in training for monitoring drugs, biologics, or medical devices, or others? I'll open that up to all of you.
Well, I feel like I've done a lot of talking, but I'll jump in. I think that initially the skills of a monitor are very, very similar. You need to know how to communicate using the traditional clinical trials terminology, the medical terminology. There have been some recent legislative initiatives to ensure that healthcare practitioners have electronic medical records. So I do think we just this year in our program instituted a computer competency pre-admission requirement for that very reason, that you also need to know not only the terminology, the regulatory structure, but also the technology and be comfortable working in that technological space. So I think from that perspective, those core skills of a monitor are the same across any investigational products. But as Angie had mentioned, there are various regulations for our industry, and they're very specific regulations to drugs, biologics, and devices. And monitors do need to receive training in those regulations and also in their company standard operating procedures for the various and different challenges for monitoring those different types of investigational products.
Angie or Jen, would you like to add anything to that?
Actually, no. I think she did a great job answering it. Yeah,
okay.
I think that's a great answer. And we do streamline the way that we, obviously monitoring devices is a little different than monitoring a biologic, and we, we do fashion training in that way. And clients that device trials, they want folks with device experience because it's a different experience level and a different knowledge level. So the key is to be just, cognizant of that, and there are different regulations that you do need to be aware of. So I thought it was a very good answer.
Okay. Before we go to question number 8, excuse me, I did forget to answer the question specifically as to what the cost was for the Foundations of Clinical Research, and that course is $45. But if you do sign up before, excuse me, November 15th, you'll receive $10 off. The next question. Can a convicted felon work in the field of clinical research?
And Vernon, I'll jump on this one too, because I've had to deal with this question fairly recently, in fact. All of the students in my program that plan to do field work do receive a criminal background check and potentially drug testing as a part of the pre-employment screening that would be customary for many of the employers in clinical trials. Most employers, when you're dealing with new drugs, new devices, new biologics that haven't been approved, safe and effective to the FDA yet, in addition to having those new test articles accessible in your professional role, we also have to think about the security of this company's medically innovative product and the proprietary information. So most roles in clinical trials do have some level of criminal background check, but there are multiple types of background checks. I have students that had transgressions in their youth or were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and more than a decade ago, that may not pass up on your standard criminal background check, any occurrence that has been over 10 years. However, felonies in particular tend to stay around and register on most criminal background checks, and depending on the nature, proprietary nature of the product and how deep the background checks go, federal background checks, which are very common in our industry, go all the way back and only exclude sealed records from when you're a juvenile. So it can be challenging. However, on the technology side, if you were to work for a data management organization, some of it, or part of the industry where you won't have direct exposure to the test article or investigational product, that can vary.
Mm-hmm.
That's where most of your variation in background checks is on the technology side. But I'd say if you have direct exposure to the investigational test article, then you should count on a criminal background check, where a felony would likely appear.
Yeah, and at PBD, criminal background checks are standard.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Even for our students that come in through the internship program.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, the next question is related, not necessarily to felony, but certainly to litigation. What are the why are there so many class action lawsuits today if there's so much clinical research trials being done up front?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with you've got more and more data on the back end now. We do begin to look at causality and long-term effects. Even though you had post-marketing studies, many of the drugs that we see now have been on the market for many, many years. and we're beginning, we will begin to see certain aspects of the drugs that have effects on parts of the body. And a lot of diabetes drugs fall into this category that we see now. The way we test them now is very different than the way we tested them 10, 15 years ago because of that. So.
Right. And a lot of the events that you see, you specifically mentioned diabetes studies. The trial that I work on is a diabetes study. A lot of the events that we're looking for, such as cardiovascular death, heart attacks, and strokes, these things take a long time to develop.
Right.
And so just without taking any drugs, heart disease is a very slow process that occurs over many, many, many years. And whether or not a drug affects such a slow process may not also be discovered until they're many, many years out. And so some of it is just the time that these diseases take to develop, and their side effects also take to develop.
One thing we saw back in the late 90s with the fen-phen combination drugs, you could see those effects very quickly. So that combination was pulled off the market within a few years of it being put on the market. Because you could see that, the vegetations and the valve, damage and those kinds of things. But you're right. I mean, we see, and there's still some documentation. Is it the drug on the diabetes? Is it the drug causing the cardiovascular problems, or is it the disease process?
Exactly.
Very
important. And I think also the kind of the elephant in the room that people don't want to admit is we're a very money-hungry culture.
Yeah.
And some of this is just people trying to find a way to get money.
Yeah.
Well, and I also like the fact that you mentioned, is it the effect of the drug on the body or the body on the drug? I tell all of my students, if you go into this area professionally, you should consider volunteering as a research subject. It's very important that we recognize that as a culture and as a community, I hear a lot, well, I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to volunteer for research. But if you don't volunteer and allow data from people like you to contribute to what FDA gets exposed to for a new drug to determine whether or not it's safe and effective, then essentially you are a guinea pig with a marketed drug because you didn't participate in the research, and the data that was produced was from people that may not have your pharmacokinetic or pharmacogenetic background. So I do think that that's essential for individuals in this area to realize that there's a lot that we do learn on the back end once a product's been approved, especially if only one type of person volunteers for research studies.
Right.
That's an excellent point.
Well, I think that when you mentioned getting into the profession leads into our last question, which addresses the average educational background of most students in your courses. And I guess we could extend that into the educational background of entry-level positions of someone getting started, career transition or otherwise.
I know at PPD, a bachelor's degree in just about every case will be required. There are a couple of departments where it would not be, but a bachelor's degree would be, is going to be required. And in fact, the students in my courses, of the 9 that I had this past session, all but 1 had 4-year degrees already.
And I would venture to agree with that most of our students either have, and most employers in the area either want you to have a minimum of an associate's degree in nursing or a bachelor's. However, when reading the eligibility criteria for employment opportunities, look out if you don't have a 4-year degree for the or equivalent experience kind of qualifier. That lets you know that an employer is open to hiring someone without a 4-year degree. But I would say that's also changed with the economy because of Workforce Investment Act and other programs and grant funding programs that are willing to help you go back to school once you lose your job. I'm seeing more individuals than ever before in my associate's degree program who are either physicians from other countries or already have their bachelor's. Although most of my graduates who graduate just with the associate's degree, I do end up advising to go on to a 4-year program.
And as part of the program, if I understand correctly, one of the critical educational components is that internship where you get some practical experience working in this sector. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And so my students who have associate degrees often end up accepting positions at the place where they've conducted field work because those types of organizations will work with students as they try to achieve their 4-year degree. Most companies these days are very supportive of that. If you're hired without a 4-year degree, they will continue to support you and contribute to flex time and other opportunities that make that goal more tangible for you.
This is Angie. I can actually speak towards that on the receiving end. About 2 years ago, Durham Tech contacted me for a potential intern who lived in the Winston-Salem area, which is where Wake Forest is, and she did not want to travel to RTP every day, understandably. And so we got it set up to where she was an intern here. She ended up doing both of her field work one per semester here with me, and she is now a project manager here at Wake Forest. She went into private practice for a little bit and then came back, and we were able to hire her on. So it's been a fabulous experience, both on her end and on ours.
Great. Thank you for that, Angie.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists again for participating in today's webinar, particularly Angie Kimel, Laurin Mancour, and Jennifer Pullum, with the vast amount of experience and knowledge they've provided for us. On your screen now, you do see the last, advertisement for the upcoming Foundations in Clinical Research, but also the promotion for our next BioForum, which is the Bench Creek Biobotanical Research and Economic Development Update, which will be led by our Biobusiness Center out of Asheville, North Carolina. It will be held on December 13th at 10:30 a.m. Details and registration are available at ncbionetwork.org. Thank you for joining. This presentation will be available in an archive format, and you will receive notification when it is available. Thank you, and this concludes today's webinar.